From comics to craft beer, Orlando's geek scene is bigger than ever. Orlando just hosted Megacon, which is one of the biggest geek parties in the world. I'm Phil Kruse, and welcome to the Orlando Real Estate Lifestyle. Today, I'll be interviewing Lauren Dubin, the co host of the podcast Hops Geek News. It's a weekly podcast about geek pop culture and craft beer. And Lauren calls Orlando home, so we're going to get her take on some of the geek culture right here in Orlando. Lauren, welcome to the Orlando Real Estate Lifestyle, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk. Always excited to talk comics, Orlando, and beer.
I bet. So I have to ask, I've listened to a few of your podcasts. We're recording at 2 p.m. on a Thursday. Are you drinking beer right now?
I'm not. I have coffee. I actually have comics on coffee. So even my coffee and mug is geek themed.
All right. All right. I'm sure she records her podcast with her co-host Matt a little bit later in the day, would be my best guess. For the listener out there, I just want to let you know we're going to be discussing today. We're going to be talking about why you should go to the next MegaCon here in Orlando. We just had a MegaCon last week. It's hosted at the Orange County Convention Center. Lauren was there. It's a big part of her podcast and her business. So she's the one you want to talk to about those sorts of things. Also, her take on the different breweries and beer spots in Orlando. And I'm even going to ask her who's the most famous person she's ever met due to her geek status. But before we get into all that, I want to make sure you guys know where you can find out about Lauren and her podcast. Again, the name of her podcast is Hops Geek News. They're on all social platforms, even social platforms I've never even heard of. So you could probably the best podcast to consume it would be on YouTube. Just search the name Hops Geek News. She also has a comprehensive link tree link that I'm going to include on my YouTube and all my podcast platforms. So you can click on that and you can pick whatever platform you want. And they do have an in-person event coming up. It's not in Orlando. It's where her co-host is from. It's in Virginia, and it's called GalaxyCon. So if you really love what Lauren's doing, check it out. Go out there and see her. And don't forget, I'm a real estate agent, and one of my main lead sources are listeners like you. A portion of all my commissions go to charity. I volunteer at the New Image Youth Center. So when it's your time to make a real estate decision, just think of me, Phil Kruse. Now that's Kruse with a K, Kruse. I'm also on all social platforms, especially Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And make sure you like and subscribe to my podcast and Lauren's podcast on YouTube by clicking the bell and doing all those things. And turn your notifications on so you get notified when she and I drop new episodes. All right, enough of that business stuff. MegaCon, Comic-Con, all the other cons, as you guys call them, Lauren, they're far from just what the layman might think of as a comic book convention by a long shot. So I want you to tell us a story based on your experience, whatever comes to mind, that can help the listener kind of encapsulate that and understand how MegaCon and Comic-Con and these different cons, you're not just thumbing through comic books.
No, absolutely not. They originally did start as that. So the San Diego Comic Con is that's basically how it got started. It was in like a hotel, in like the basement of a hotel, and it's just grown. But what these cons have become are basically pop culture cons. You know, you're now seeing like a 90s one spring up and all these little niche ones spring up. But what's so amazing about Orlando is there's so many levels of it. So there is still a comic book area, and anybody who is a fan of comics, do not skip that road. You can talk to the creators of the comics that you're reading, of the comics that you love, the stories you love that you've seen on the big screen. And they're so personable and they're so excited to talk comics because honestly, they're just as big a geeks as everybody else that's there, if not bigger. But you know, it's also really neat because you can meet celebrities are out there, and you know, you can pay to take pictures and stuff, but you can also just go up and say hi. And it's a lot of small businesses, many from Orlando and from Florida, and some out of the States as well, that are selling their handmade crafts that are custom to whether it's Wolverine or Superman or, you know, all these things you never knew you needed, like a, you know, wood thing with Wolverine's first appearance in Incredible Hulk issue 181, which I have by my front door. It's so pretty. But I mean, endless amounts of Legos. And then you can see replicas of the Batmobile, of Baby from Supernatural, the Ghostbusters mobile, Jurassic Park cars. There's so much going on. And there's also charity going on. If anybody is familiar with Star Wars and the 501 First, they're an amazing organization that they go around to cons cosplaying. And I actually got to see them at New York Comic Con in October. And I was talking to them like, oh, where's your area? Where are you guys set up? And they're like, we don't get to set up here like we do in Orlando. So the one in Orlando is very special. They take over a huge amount of the con where you are like surrounded by droids and a fake cantina and so many Mandalorians. They literally did a conga line this year. And they're all there raising money for Give Kids the World. And anybody not familiar with that, it's where kids who come to Orlando to go to Disney World or Universal who are sick, that's where they stay. So it's a fantastic organization. You can do all sorts of, donations to them. They do runs and all sorts of things if you're local and you want to get involved. If you're not local, also you can donate. But I always love walking through there. And then, they got a Venmo code, of course, now, because not everybody has cash. Drop some cash in there, but you don't have to. But it's truly amazing. And the best part is just the camaraderie and the sense of like, these are strangers you don't know. And you're having that moment of, I get that reference. I also love this. And you're bonding with strangers and you immediately have that icebreaker of, oh, I love your shirt. You love my shirt. You get my shirt. Yeah, I get it. So it's really cool. It's amazing to go to if you've never gone to one.
Well, that's interesting because most of the stuff you said, I understand from my own personal experience. What I didn't really think about until you just said it right now is the social aspect of it, where you can go and bond with like-minded people over a particular genre, TV show or something, and make new friends, get plugged into a subculture that exists right here in Orlando. Because I would assume most of the people going are people that live in Orlando, although I know it draws from all over the country. I mean, you were at Megacon this year. Tell me about that experience. How was it like? Is it international? Like,
it's definitely gotten international. I talked to some people from Canada. Most of the people you run into are locals, but most of the guests and the exhibitors outside of the people selling things are not local. So comic book artists are coming from all over the world. But you do get a lot of cosplayers that fly in for these events because a lot of these people go to all the cons. Like I saw a lot of people here that I've seen in New York or that I've seen in Utah because I've gone to FanX is another big one in Utah. I haven't gone to San Diego. That's still on my bucket list. One day. But it has grown.
What's cosplay for the listener out there that doesn't know what that means?
So cosplay is literally just dressing up. It's like Halloween. So some people get very, very into it and they're very particular and literally look like they came off a movie set. Other people will do all these different sorts of mashups, which can be absolutely hilarious. And any Deadpool fans, I'm sure you can imagine, there are so many variations of Deadpool walking around these cons, especially after Deadpool and Wolverine. We saw a lot of Wolverines as well. And it is hilarious. I complimented one Deadpool, and the guy started joking around with us, hands my friend a card that literally just says my card. He goes, here's my card. And then he hands me a lime and says, oh, I have a pickup lime for you, and literally hands me a real lime. So some of these people are just, it's impressive too, the level of artwork they go into. And we saw like a Bumblebee from Transformers that really looked like Bumblebee from Transformers. You always see a lot of Harley Quinns, but I mean, it's Halloween for grown-ups, which Halloween is also for grown-ups, but that's what it is. You're dressing up, you're having fun, and you're getting to sometimes meet the characters who portrayed these characters. And to me, cosplayers are the heart of every con. They are not there to get paid. They're not, they're doing this for fun. They're doing it because they love it, and they're bringing an extra level of fun and camaraderie to the event.
That sounds awesome, and yeah, I can imagine them putting the passion and the passion they have behind it. It reminds me of being at Halloween back in my 20s, going down to Church Street. Me and my buddies we'd go all in on our costumes. We'd enter the costume contest, and half of the fun, if not most of the fun, really, yeah, most of the fun was the people watching and seeing the folks that were out there from Disney and had access to all this prosthetics and craziness. I mean, for the average person out there that it maybe isn't interested in what we've said yet, I mean, just going for the people watching and the costumes would be worth the price of admission, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Yeah. My husband's not into any of it, and scheduling conflict happened. He didn't get to go, but that's what he said. He's like, I want to go just for the people watching. But yeah, it's amazing. Top tier.
Nice. Absolutely. So I'm going to talk more about the cons in general and as it pertains to Orlando. We've been talking about MegaCon that just happened. And you mentioned a couple other ones that are coming to Orlando. But for the layman out there listening, most people like myself, we've heard of Comic-Con. So is there a Comic-Con in Orlando?
So Comic-Con is the name of the San Diego one. So every con is a little different. So here it's just called Megacon Orlando. But they are, in like New York is New York Comic Con, and then you go to Utah and it's Fan X Comic Con. So they all have just their own little names. But it's kind of like, if anyone who's ever taken a marketing class, it's like Kleenex. They all get called Comic Cons.
Yeah, San Diego beat them
Whereas a
too with that
tissue will
brand.
get called Kleenex. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That brand recognition. So I've done some research, and I know that some pretty famous folks go there. Like you mentioned, comic book creators. I would assume occasionally some famous actors from, nowadays it's mainstream with the Marvel series, all the Marvel and DC comics that everyone knows, in the different universes that have been created. Who is the most famous person or people that you have ever met at one of these events?
So through doing these events and having this kind of like platform, I would say the most famous person I've met was through Zoom was Patton Oswalt. So he actually writes comic books for Dark Horse. Anybody who that name's not registering yet, that's Remy from Ratatouille. So we got to interview him about his comics. And when he said my name in my head, I'm like, oh my God, Remy just said my name. Calm down. Stay focused. But in particular at the cons, because we now get press passes for these things. And when we were in Utah, for any Kevin Smith fans, we actually got to interview Brian O'Halloran and Jeff Anderson. They are the Clerks. So if you've seen any of the Kevin Smith movies, the main two Clerks, they were a great time. They were so sweet. I think we did about a 10 to 13-minute interview. We now joke around that Brian O'Halloran's my best friend. It's become a joke of the show because he follows us. So that would be hands down the most famous person we've gotten to in-person interview directly at a con. And that was fantastic.
And on the Zoom call, the guy, I didn't realize, is the movie Ratatouille based on a comic written by him?
No, that was just totally random. So, Patton Oswalt's been in so many things these days, but about a little over a year ago, he started a comic story called Minor Threats. And it's him and Jordan Bloom. And they've had so many different artists and different comic book writers coming in, and they're creating this whole Minor Threats universe. So they've done Minor Threats, The Alternates, Minor Threats, The Fastest Way Down, Barfly, and now they're doing The Brood. It's been a fantastic comic series, again, at Dark Horse. It is an adult-themed comic, hence, the one guy's name is Barfly. But we got to, when he was promoting that, we got to talk to him about promoting that. And I do a lot of the reviews for that on a website called Nerd Initiative. So that's been fantastic. But we're Hops Geek News connected to Nerd Initiative. So, but my baby is Hops Geek News.
Well, that's a perfect segue, because that's the next topic I wanted to address, and remind the listener that you do have your own podcast alongside of your co-host Matt, which is called Hops Geek News. But I want to pivot slightly and note that the word hops is in the title of your podcast, and you guys generally are drinking beer on your podcast. So why, tell the listener a little bit more about what your show is about, and how beer in general, how beer and geek culture mix, in your opinion.
So we actually started off as a beer podcast. So this was during the dark days of 2020. We were writing articles for a website called Hops News, and I was focusing on Orlando beer and beer at theme parks. And during COVID, we're like, hey, we're all bored. Why don't we hop on a podcast? And so we were actually doing weekly podcasts about beer, interviewing small breweries and collecting donations for either that brewery, because times were tough, or a charity of their choosing. And me and Matt would go off on tangents arguing about the finale of Game of Thrones, or arguing about Wolverine or Batman or something like that. And so the guy who runs Hops News was like, you two need a spinoff. And that's how it became Hops Geek News. So Hops News, once, the world went back to the world being somewhat normal. I don't know that we'll ever be normal again, or if we ever were.
What's normal? Yeah.
Exactly. So the beer one kind of wrapped up because people had to get back to their lives, but Matt and I never stopped. We still have a focus on craft beer, though, because we find it very important to just support these small businesses. And like you said, they're very intertwined with geek. Like, there's such a sense of community. Like breweries before Prohibition were about community and bringing people together. And this is your local watering hole. And, we have clean water, during whatever famine is going on that other people don't have, kind of thing. And it was a way for people to connect. And a lot of these breweries, I think Rock Pit Brewing has a Guardians of the Galaxy trivia coming up. I've played Marvel trivia at Dead Words before, which is now Ivanhoe. But a lot of these breweries do such geek-themed events. And even if you don't drink, they have non-alcoholic beers are becoming very popular, which I'm personally am loving. I'm a big fan of the non-alcoholics. Get a lot of mocktails now, a lot of cocktails, a lot of seltzers. So there's something for everyone at these small breweries. And again, it's just a sense of community. It's just finding that little niche that somebody else loves that you can connect with people on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And the NA beers, I mean, I was in Brazil for 3 weeks with my family. My wife's Brazilian, and, I drank every day for 20 days. And when I came back, and I've done this for the past 3 years, I'm like, I don't even want a drop of alcohol. Of course, after a few days, that that changes with our addictions kicking in. But I managed to last about 30 days, and I went to parties at friends' houses where everyone's drinking. And in the NA, the non-alcoholic beers are absolutely delicious. The IPAs, honestly, you cannot tell the difference
No.
with some of these beers, right? I mean, it's crazy. What is? I hate to put you on the spot, and it's okay if you don't have a perfect answer, but do you have a favorite brewery in Orlando, or maybe a top 2 or 3?
I know that
One
is a
that,
hard question because it's like picking your favorite child. But I have to say one of my favorites is Sideward Brewing. They've been around for a while. Every style they make is fantastic. They make one of my favorite beers called Yacht Money, which is New England. Great little scratch kitchen. And I'm a big fan of boiled peanuts. And they have boiled peanuts, which you either love or you hate. So it's
and
a
Sidewards over there in the Milk District, right on Robinson and Bumby, right?
yep, right there. And
Nice.
around the corner is 12 Talons, which is a fairly new one. They're
Yeah.
fantastic, but I think a lot of people haven't heard about them yet. They're still somewhat new, but I'm loving their beer. And then, I
Great.
mean, Tactical is another great one. I could keep going. But yeah.
Tactical in Baldwin Park. Sure, I know that was,
Yeah.
but I'd never heard of the 12 Talons. Did you go to the tactical belly flop contest that was earlier this year in Baldwin Park?
No, I did hit up their Fated Kingdom Brewery fest, but I did not hit up the belly flop. I did see it on social media.
Oh man, it's wild. I love it. So speaking of a sense of community, so you kind of touched on this already, but more specifically for, I guess, geek culture. I know that the breweries can overlap with some of their trivia nights and different hangouts, but are there some specific geek hangout spots if there's people that are new to Orlando and they don't know where to go, that you could recommend perhaps? What comes to mind?
So if you're going to be over by the theme parks, well, obviously the Cantina on Hollywood Studios is top tier geek bar. But if you're going to be over in Orlando, because we don't really have too many breweries in that area, right by the convention center, you will find Half Barrel Beer Project. So we always end every con there. They have a kitchen now. They have, they usually have like tripping animals. They'll have, some I've seen Tactical there. So they'll have some local beer, and they do have a very small system, hence the name Half Barrel. So again, Half Barrel Beer Project right near Universal. The construction's crazy over there right now, getting ready for Epic. So they're actually thinking that Half Barrel might end up getting pretty slammed once Epic opens up and more people find out about it. So that's
Nice.
one I definitely recommend. Another bar, so this is teeny tiny. If you're ever near iDrive, it's a comic book store called Gods and Monsters. And in the back, they have a speakeasy kind of bar that's like Fallout themed. And it has some other things going on too. And they have great craft beer selection as well. And they also have different fun themed cocktails. So those I would say are going to be your closest to theme park area. But if you can make it out of theme park area, one of I would say the biggest geek themed breweries around is Hourglass. So there's one in Longwood, and then there's one over in Hourglass District in Orlando.
Mhm.
And there, if you look around in their walls, especially the one in Longwood, it is covered in Star Wars and Back to the Future and Marvel. I mean, they've done a great job. So you can tell those are definitely geeks at heart that opened a brewery for sure.
I bet. Another brewery I'm familiar with, especially their tap room there in the Hourglass District. I love when people come there and think it's named Hourglass District after them.
Right.
It's named after the lake up the street. And I just wanted to make sure the listener understands. You mentioned Epic a couple times there, talking about the brewery over on iDrive. She's referring to Epic Universe, which is the newest theme park being built by Universal Orlando. It's almost open. It's going to have Super Mario or Super Nintendo Land and Monster World and more Harry Potter. I have a whole podcast dedicated to just talking about Epic Universe. So make sure you check out my episode library for that if you want to find out more. And I have another question about the cons in general. What else is coming I guess this year in the near future to probably the Orlando or Orange County Convention Center? That's a con style, more of a geek culture type event coming up.
I don't know of any this year, but 2026 from Megacon has already announced. So they're going to be back March 19th to the 22nd. This will be the first time it's over spring break. I feel that's a bold move on their part, but we'll see how that goes. I will be avoiding the theme parks that week for sure. I mean, there's always little ones popping up, like Ocala will do a little one. But as far as the Orange County Convention Center, that's the only one I'm particularly familiar with. But if you follow certain things online and you'll see little ones pop up. Tampa does Spookala twice a year, which is actually I feel like very underrated and will probably start to become much bigger because it started as all like scary movie stuff, but then they've had like Dave Bautista and they've had people from The Boys and they've had other things that weren't just horror.
Oh, interesting. Cool. Thank you. And I'm going to do another little quick pivot here. You obviously launched a podcast and have grown in an entrepreneurial way. I know your husband is also an entrepreneur, a self-employed guy. So I'm going to put you on the spot here, coming from an entrepreneur to an entrepreneur. A lot of people that listen to my podcast are self-employed or want to be entrepreneurs or something like that. Is there a single tip or something, words of inspiration that you could offer to the entrepreneur listening out there if they want to start a podcast or take that plunge and quit their job? What do you got for them?
I think it's just eat that frog, just do it. And I think consistency is big. I mean, obviously we would like to be bigger. This is more of a hobby. Any money we make goes right back into the podcast at this point. But if you love it and it's really what you want, you have to just keep doing it. Like there are weeks where it's like, we're struggling to find time because Matt and I both have families and we both have kids and other responsibilities and everything. But it's very important. Like we've done a fantastic job in the almost 5 years we've been doing this. That we've missed 1 week, and that's because he's in the military and he was in a hotel room and we were recording. The Wi-Fi was just too bad. We had to eat that week. Yeah. But so that's the only week in the almost 5 years we've been doing this. And a lot of times we'll do extra stuff too. We'll do lives. Like Captain America comes out today. I'm going later today. So obviously we're going to have to do something special for that. Reaction kind of thing. But I would just say staying consistent and actually doing it and prioritizing it. And because that's the thing, you have all these other priorities. And when this isn't something you need to do right now, it gets put on the back burner. So it's really all about what you make of it.
I think it's a great tip. And I'll add to that with the prioritization and consistency is scheduling. For me, I'm very schedule driven. And I think most professionals listening out there are the same way, especially like me, I have 3 kids. Well, I have kids. I happen to have 3 kids. And if I don't put something on my calendar, it's not getting done. And, if you have a side hustle, a new business venture, a podcast, and you want to do it, you better put it on your calendar. I'm recording every Thursday from my home studio, come hell or high water. I had an issue with a guest last week. We couldn't make it work with our Wi-Fi stuff. And guess what? When he dropped, I recorded my own podcast. So be consistent with whatever you do. Know that you are going to make it. I think that's a great tip, Lauren. Thank you. I don't got any more questions. I just want to say how I absolutely love Orlando. And I think people like you, Lauren, are a big reason why our city is so amazing. We have such a diverse culture, obviously a strong geek culture with Megacon and our connections with the parks and Universal. And it's so awesome that you're here. I'm so glad you chose to join me today and inform our listeners about the geek subculture and fill us in on the different breweries. Now, with that said, Lauren, if they do want to find out more about you and more about your podcast, what's the best way they could do that?
Really just Googling Linktree Hops Geek News will take you to our Linktree. I often do that sometimes to add our Linktree to things. But we're, like Phil, you were saying at the beginning of this, we're on social media networks you didn't know existed. My co-host is younger than me, so he finds these things. He's like, we have to join TikTok. I'm like, we have to join the what? We're on TikTok, Blue Sky, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and everywhere. It's just at Hops Geek News. and that's where you can find us everywhere. And if you search that up on any podcasting platform, we're there too. And yeah, thank you for having me on. I'm always happy to talk the podcast. I love talking about these things and happy to get the word out.
Well, it's my pleasure. I hope we can get together in a social setting sometime soon. And I just want to remind the listener, when you're out there surfing the web looking for Hops Geek news, don't forget to find me as well on all social platforms at Phil Kruse. Again, that's Kruse with a K, those pesky Germans, Kruse. Like and subscribe to my podcast. I interview all kinds of local guests like Lauren, like Bruno from Pizza Bruno, like the owner of Pig Floyd, Thomas Ward. The list just goes on. And I have, lifestyle ones, real estate ones, everything under the sun. Lauren, thanks again for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
And for the listener out there, always know that your best life in Orlando is within reach. Keep embracing every moment. Cheers. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.